Hello everyone, Comrade Murray here. Today we're going to be talking about an event in Spanish political economic history known as the Spanish economic miracle. The term economic miracle is one commonly used by bourgeois economists to describe countries who have had a late capitalist development and subsequent economic boom following a period of industrialization. In reality, this is an idealist term to use since it attempts to pin economic development purely on miraculous forces of luck, when in reality there are contradictions within this relation to production which drive forward the development of productive forces. Similar comparisons to this use might be the Japanese and Greek economic miracles. Alright, well, why don't we get right into it? With the defeat of the Republic in 1939, the fascist state, which represented the interests of the imperialists and the semi-feudal landlords, went about reversing any progressive land reforms which the Republicans put into place in their controlled territories. Peasants were evicted off the land and forced to pay up their full rents, and in many cases were executed if they could not pay. Landlord rule was completely reinstated in all of the rural areas. The war had obviously left the country devastated economically, but this is not the primary factor for the late capitalist development. The primary factor is that the Falange Party, in collaboration with the Catholic Church, represented landlord interests, as the Falange Party since its early years was supported by imperialists and landlords. Imperialism allies itself with the landlord class in semi-feudal countries, which stifles the development of productive forces and prevents feudalism from being completely abolished. Subsequently, they issued the policy of autarky to prevent the development of the country. The industrial proletariat had it no better. Wages were stagnant and falling throughout the 40s, and inflation soared. Economic recovery faltered, and in some years Spain registered negative growth rates. In 1940, the Vertical Syndicate was created as the sole legal union based on the class collaborationist idea of José Antonio Primo de Rivera, known as National Syndicalism or Falangism, which stated that class struggle could be ended by harmonizing the worker and employer interests. In reality, this is nothing more than deception, and it is the same belief of Hitler and Mussolini, and this is exemplified in the practices of the syndicate, which heavily favored capital. Strikes were forbidden, and wages could not be bargained for. The existence of this union was only intended to stifle class struggle, which would have led to the destabilization of the already fragile and failing economy. By the early 1950s, GDP per capita was barely 40% of the average for West European countries. Then, after the decade of economic stagnation, a tripling of prices, the growth of a black market, food rationing, and widespread deprivation, gradual development of the productive forces began to take place. Actual efforts to liberalize the economy and develop productive forces came in the early 1950s. The first came in September 1953 with the signing of a mutual defense agreement, the Pact of Madrid, between the United States and Spain. In return for permitting the establishment of United States military bases on Spanish soil, the Eisenhower administration provided substantial economic aid to the Franco regime. More than $1 billion in economic assistance flowed into Spain during the remainder of the decade as a result of an agreement, and the average GDP was at a 5% increase every year. Franco's attempts at reforms were made more difficult with the bloated bureaucratic capitalist system and the still persistent semi-feudalism, which manifested in the land tenure system. The debate within the fascist regime took place on how to solve these contradictions, and Franco eventually decided on a group of neoliberals over the old fascist economists. The group included bankers, industrial executives, some academic economists, and members of the semi-secret Roman Catholic lay organization, Opus Dei, or Work of God. The change in economic policy manifested in 1957 with a complete overhaul of Franco's Council of Ministers to include a new group of capitalists as opposed to the old Falangists who staunchly opposed the changes while clinging to their semi-feudal landlord interests. In January 1958, Spain became an associate member of the Organization for European Economic Cooperation, which became the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development in September 1961. Which eased up its autarky and integrated Spain into the rest of the capitalist world. To help achieve rapid development, there was a massive government investment through key companies like the National Industrial Conglomerate, Instituto Nacional de Industria, the mass market company SEAT in Barcelona, the big steel plant of and Sedesa in Aviles, and the shipbuilder Empresa Nacional Bazan. The automotive industry in particular saw huge increases. From 1958 to 1972, the car company I mentioned, SEAT, grew at a yearly compound rate of 21.7%. In 1946, there were 72,000 private cars in Spain, and in 1966, there were over 1 billion. With heavy protection from foreign competition within the Spanish domestic market, these companies led the industrialization of the country and creating new industrial areas, most notably around Madrid. But this rapid industrialization meant the mass movement of rural tenant farmers to these new industrial areas, resulting in further proletarianization of the peasant population. Spain received massive amounts of foreign aid from agencies like the IMF. The gigantic increase in tourism that drew more than 20 million visitors per year by the end of the 1960s, and that accounted for at least 9% of the gross national product. And direct foreign investment, which between 1960 and 1974 amounted to $7.6 billion. More than 40% of this investment came from the United States. This stabilization program was successful in eliminating the backwards semi-feudal production that had persisted up to the 1950s, and as a result, a new, larger proletariat existed, and Spain began the export of capital to Western Europe and other parts of the world at a much higher rate. The period of rapid growth lasted until 1975 and started in 1959. When the oil stagflation crisis hit, it caused the end of this period of growth, and the oil stagflation crisis was caused by an overproduction of oil. Of course, bourgeois economists may paint this period as being all good, but it came at the tremendous expense of the working class, who were still experiencing high rates of poverty due to the massive amounts of exploitation this industrialization demanded. Today in Spain, the poverty rate is 21%, ranked among some of the highest in the EU. Well, that's going to be it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please leave a comment and like and subscribe if you enjoyed. And please join my Discord server. I'm going to leave a link in the description. And if you have any questions or any criticisms regarding the video, please let me know and I will listen. Other than that, I will see you guys next time. Goodbye.